things happen, and his mother says, watch for the helpers, because they'll always appear. And on that note, I'd like to share something that's been really interesting, because in my training, that I'm currently in, I knew that some of this trauma was being held in. And you know, it's such an interesting thing about trauma, because social construct says you have to keep your act together. None of it, you know, we can watch a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old have a fit when they're exhausted or overstimulated in a parking lot, and we can have compassion because we're like, well, that's a child. Well, as adults, we also get exhausted and overwhelmed and sensory overload, and yet we don't have the ability or the social support to say, I'm not handling this well, and we feel shame or vulnerable. And so we push down that emotional state. But in my training, I know that some of this is going to continue to come up, and I have this amazing experience where the language that was used is called flooding, when all of your senses are just heightened, and your body's in overwhelm as it's trying to release. It's finally giving the signal, and the body is finally giving the brain the signal that it's been holding on all these years to so much pain, giving the signal it's time to let it go. It's safe to let it go, and that's what it comes down to, is safety to let it go, because the brain has one role, it's just to keep us alive and safe. So it's not going to let those things go until it gets the signal to do so under the conditions of safety. And I had this experience and was flooding and remembering, and one of the things that the practitioner will say is, how old are you in this moment? Because we're responding to something in our history. Our brain is now, and at the time, I was 42, and that was the year that I was nearly dead in bed. And I said, I'm 42, I'm alone, I'm isolated, I'm very scared, I'm in an incredible amount of pain, and all of that was coming up. And so the practitioner had a really beautiful way of supporting me, and she said, let's just bring in some extra support. And even in my near-death experience, we obviously know this isn't the only realm. We obviously know there's many other dimensions that simultaneously overlap, and that there's resources on the spirit realm once we can tap into that. And she says, let's bring in some support. What do you want? Who do you want to have? And immediately my brain said, Jesus. I want Jesus to be with me. I need Jesus. And I swear to you, within 3 seconds, in my mind's eye, I could see Jesus standing on the right side, and I could feel the warmth of his hand on my shoulder, which caused me to start to breathe again. I was hyperventilating so much, in just this really intense state, and I could feel the warmth. And so I was able to calm down, knowing that and that's what's so beautiful, is when you crave and need support, and just calling in the spirit realm that is available to us once we tune into that or ask. And I had this conversation with Jesus, and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of the pain. I hurt so much. I feel alone. Why do I have to carry this burden? It's so intense for me. And there was a great deal of compassion. And I heard him say, I signed up for a very challenging life this time, and I had a mission to overcome immense challenges, was the words he used. And that I knew on a spirit level that this was going to be an immense journey, but I also was given great support in the spirit realm to support me on that journey, as are everyone else. And I said, but it's so challenging, I don't know if I can do it anymore. I'm tired and overwhelmed in the pain. And I saw it was really beautiful, and this is why I know it was true, because I would never have used this analogy ever myself. But I heard Jesus lean in, and he said, even I, at the level of my development, will sometimes fall in the ditch some. And you have to know that all of us will have a moment where we fall in the ditch. And all of us will have that moment where someone will come along and lift us and throw us a hand. And he showed this image of like somebody reaching down and lifting me up. And for him to say, even I fall in the ditch. have this, all of us are on this path. All of us have challenges. All of us have challenges we don't know that we can handle, but none of us were meant to do it alone. And that was very, very healing for me, to show we will all have challenges where we fall down, but we will all have somebody who comes and gives us a hand. Yes?
I love that. Well, that kind of answered my question a little bit, because I was reading the part where you were in Hawaii and you met a woman, and I didn't understand what you said about like a cross showed up on her finger, but I was really, so I want to know about that. I also really am curious about you in this lifetime, you're processing so many traumas from past lives. Why did you sign up for so much? Why do you think this lifetime you chose to take on all of that? Because when I work with myself or other people too, and they have trauma come up from past lives, it's not usually this much or this intense. So I mean, it was huge for me to read this, for one thing, because like I would have never known that you've been through something so intensely difficult. But yeah, I just want to know if you've come across your why for it.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question, because I can't
Yes.
hear her?
So what she was asking, so I'll share a little bit about part of the journey in my healing, and a woman named Sharon Forrest, an amazing healer, and she was one of the healing modalities that Scott literally carried me on the plane, and a week later I ran off the tarmac. And so that was the level of healing that took place. Although, I will go back and share this, although very shortly I was back in my own environment, and within a very few couple of days, maybe a week or so, I was in bed again, because I was back in the same environment that was signaling my brain and my emotional state to have the same response, to have the same chemical response, and everything just like, oh yeah, I forgot, I'm sick, and I was back in bed. So, Sharon Forrest, so we had it's written in my book how our daughter was in 3rd grade. When I was in 3rd grade, my mom was still not very strong and healthy, but she was working. And when I was in 3rd grade, I was in a school program, and I really wanted my mom to be there, and was waiting, and she was planning on being there, but she was a waitress, and her boss wouldn't give her the night off, and so I spent the whole night looking for my mom in the audience, and was very sad to know that she couldn't make it because her boss wouldn't let her off work. And that is something that always affected me. And so when our daughter was in a 3rd grade program, I had missed everything the prior part of the year, and this was a couple weeks after my near-death experience. And she really wanted me to be at a school program. And I really had to battle my ego, because I felt so much shame and humiliation that my husband had to carry me into the auditorium. I was in so much pain, I couldn't sit up to do her hair, so she had to do her own hair and get herself ready. But I was too weak to sit upright, and so I asked him to lay me down in the back of the auditorium, in the darkened auditorium, and he sat up with the family so that our daughter would see him. And she knew that I was there, just that she couldn't see me in the back of the auditorium. And I sat there, I was laying there, and it was cold and it was sticky, and the bolts for the chairs were like pressing against my back, and I was just in this moment of, I felt like it couldn't get worse than this. This desperate state. And I was also so afraid somebody was gonna come in late and stumble in and step on me when I was already in a really fragile state. And right after that, Scott made the decision that he knew that I needed to be out of my environment in order to heal. And I think that's something that is for many people, that in order to heal, you need to leave everything that's familiar, because everything that's familiar is associated with the emotions that are associated with trauma or pain or illness. And so he made all of the arrangements. He intuitively was guided to take me to Kauai, and he said that he was told that there was going to be a healer that we were going to meet. And so we went completely on a wing and a prayer. And I was very nervous that they weren't going to let me fly if they saw me in that weakened state. And somehow I mustered up enough strength. He did carry me, but I was leaning against and walking upright because I was so nervous they were going to stop us from getting on the plane. And they had this welcoming at the resort that we were staying at. And at the end, in that evening, everybody was gathering. They had a little bit of a welcome for the new guests, and they had hors d'oeuvres and wine, and they were showing activities for the island that people could join. And so he sat me on a overstuffed chair, and he was getting food, and I was just observing everybody and just praying I wasn't going to just start shaking violently. And a woman came and sat beside me, making conversation, and she asked where I was from. I told her I was from Utah. Why was I there? And I was like, oh gosh, how much do I dare share? Because people don't go to Hawaii just to hear other people's traumas. And I didn't want to burden her, but I said I've just been very sick, and my husband brought me here to heal. And her eyes were so vibrant and blue, and she was a much older woman. She was at this time, I think, in her late 70s. She looked at me and she says, I think I'm here to help heal you, and I'm supposed to help you. And at that time, her friend came and sat down beside her, and Scott sat beside me, and the four of us were engaged in conversation. And I learned that she was a minister and a naturopath. I learned that she had many healing modalities under her belt. And it was decided that the next morning at 9 a.m. that he was going to take me to her condo at the resort, and that she was going to do a healing session on me. We arrived and sat at the kitchen table. Everything had been removed out of the living room except for there was one chair that was sitting. The couch was pushed against the wall, and Scott and her friend were there as witness. She had a chair sitting at the corner at the carpet, and the carpet was almost the same color, this very pale, almost white. It was actually a little lighter than this. And so that is really important as to having that white carpet. But we sat at the kitchen table and visited. She told me that she knew Egyptian numerology and astrology. She knew a lot about soul agreements based upon your birth date and birth information. And so we were in conversation. She told us that, so she was writing down my birth information. She said that I came to overcome immense challenges. She said that I had a warrior spirit, that I was the wounded healer, all of these things that I was a little familiar with anyway. And as she was writing, she said, we will begin when there's a cross that appears on my pointer finger, which was this one as she's writing. And of course, all of my attention is watching this pointer finger because I had no idea what to anticipate what that meant. But about 15 minutes late into it, a very long red cross, very bright, it almost looked like a tattoo. I watched it just grow with more intensity, and it became very, very bright red, and a cross appeared. And she was watching me watch this finger, and she looked down and saw that the cross was there. She said, it's time to begin. And she moved me over to the chair that was right between the kitchen and the living room, just right onto the carpet, and explained to me that many people flail about a lot, scream, cry, all of those are possible. And I was and my brain was like, I'm not a drama queen, so that's not going to be me. I definitely witnessed many drama queens, and I knew that was not going to be me. But I'm like, okay. She said, just be prepared. You'll most likely end up on the floor very quickly, but I will guide you. And so we began. And I honestly can't tell you how she did what she did, but she placed her hands upon my head, and within a very short period of time, within maybe 20 seconds, my body started doing this, and I started waving, and then I collapsed to the ground. And as I collapsed, I was transported. That experience lasted for 4 hours, and I was transported to many, many past lives, always at climax of that life, of how I was going to die. And so I saw very primitive lifetimes, I saw very violent lifetimes, and one of them that stood out is I had a lifetime where I was giving birth to a daughter, and I was hemorrhaging, and so I bled in that life. Scott can attest, everybody in the room could smell the blood, and I was panicked that I was in this realm and in this separate realm at the same time. And the way I could describe it, it was much like a virtual reality, that you're wearing goggles and you're experiencing all of this experience in real time and still reside in this physical world. And I could feel, when I touched down on my yoga pants, they felt soaking wet and warm and sticky from the blood. We could all smell the blood, and I was really nervous that I had bled profusely all over the carpet. And so I kept my eyes closed and I said, can we stop? I'm really scared about the carpet. And everybody, she's like, no, everything's fine. And she helped me open my eyes, and there was nothing there. As soon as I closed my eyes, blood everywhere. It was just a really immense thing. But there was a lifetime where I was speaking tongues, and I was using my hand as like Morse code. That was a very interesting experience. But all of those were obviously to help release the trauma from that lifetime. My answer as to why I chose that is part of my soul agreement was to come heal ancestral trauma and to learn the skills to do that, to help assist other people. So I became my own rat
Teacher.
in the cage.
Right.
So yes, that's why.
I have a question. I understand that you do quantum healing hypnotherapy. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm also certified in that and beyond BQHT. And I've had many sessions, which has helped in my healing journey as well. Your journey sounds very similar to mine. I'm curious, the experience that you experienced in Kauai in this woman's condo, was it more intense than a hypnotherapy session?
Yes. Yes, and obviously, I mean, I've had over 300 clients as far as QHHT, and I've been a past life regression therapist since 2007, and so I've had many of those experiences. I think they're incredible, but this one, I would say, QHHT process is, I would probably rate on a scale, probably about a 6, and this was solid 10. I could feel when I've had, obviously, every client is different in their capacity and how deep they can go, and so based upon their own level of receivership and ability to just release and be present, then they may have different levels of sensation and obviously access different senses. Visual sense is obviously the most important that most people rely on, but we have other senses as well. So a knowing or a feeling or scent. All of those senses were much more enhanced, and it wasn't just like a quick glimpse. When I've been regressed, I don't see the entire picture the entire time. It'd be just like little glimpses for me personally. Although I know that clients have different versions of that and different levels of that. This one was in real time. It was living it as if it was 100% present.
And that is amazing to me, because my sessions are so intense that it would be almost hard for me to imagine having something happen more intense than what I have experienced personally. But the only thing I can relate to that is I've done plant medicine, and I've had some very, very intense memories in that as well. I went to Costa Rica this past May and did combo and for 4 days, and then did a high dose of psilocybin, and the intensity, because it brings out, it helps bring out what trauma that you haven't dealt with,